I'm Brandon Clark. This is my co-host Swall Hall, and today we're meeting on uncommon grounds. They're uncommon grounds with fire all over them from the topics this episode. And actually, knowing Swall, I don't know how uncommon our grounds will be on some of these topics. But we're covering, of course, the ICE shooting that just happened a few days ago. Heart goes out to Renee Good. We're going to talk about the Venezuela regime change, the law enforcement operation. I guess if I'm framing it in the conservative way or the MAGA way. I won't offend Swab, but and then Somali fraud. The large story. I think it started with like Medicare fraud. It's went to like daycares and it's just
Yep.
all over the place. So we'll discuss some of that stuff, and then we're going to end with a debate on tradition. Is it a feature or a bug? Is it beneficial or harmful? Essentially, we'll talk about that. And knowing me and Swab, that's where the uncommon grounds will come. So starting with the ICE shooting, like I said, my heart goes out to Renee Good. That's where I would want to start. This is a mother. This is a daughter. This is a wife, someone with a family who, in my opinion, was murdered. I think by all angles, you look at the video, it's murder. I guess I don't want to poison the well with my framing too much before I let Swall give his opinion. So I'll stop there with my heart goes out to Renee Good. In my opinion, it was messed up. Swall, give what your thoughts are, and then we can kind of delve into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be surprising for anybody for me to say my heart goes out to Renee Good and her family, friends, anybody who was affected, anybody who's witnessed the video and was traumatized by that, anybody. It's always horrible to lose human life, obviously pro-lifer. So, yeah, my heart goes out, prayers and everything. So, but yeah, I think I didn't watch it when it first happened. As some of you guys know, I'm doing Exodus 90, so I have been like no screen. So I only looked it up and read about it like just to prep for the show. And so, uh, I haven't seen a lot of the online discourse. So I don't know how everyone else is feeling about it. But for me, obviously, I think that lethal force has to be the last resort when dealing with ICE agents, police officers, even just like a domestic dispute, anything like that. I think that gunning someone down or trying to kill them or anything is always going to be like the last bastion of hope. And from what I understand, and I know it's we can only see so much in the video clip. You know, we weren't all there, but from what I understand, the ICE agent was not in any immediate danger really whatsoever. The car was pretty far from them. It was going like a mile an hour. Easily could get out of the way. I've seen a few things about like resisting and blah 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 blah, but again, I don't think any of that ever justifies just murdering somebody in cold blood. I think that there are so many other ways to incapacitate somebody for trying to arrest them, detain them, etc. So, yeah, I think that the ICE agent needs to be held accountable for this absolutely, and we need to. I don't know if there's body cam, but we need to figure out why they use lethal force. There needs to be a trial. We need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to uh, search for justice. So that's my initial take on the situation.
Yeah, so I definitely there is a quote unquote body cam, which I'll get into in a second, and we can discuss. But I do want to lay out there's also been plenty of witnesses that have talked to like CNN, ABC, all these like Fox even. All
Okay.
of them corroborate the idea that the ICE agent was like telling this lady she wasn't even like in a stop. They were telling her, go, like you're in the way, get out of here. And then she goes, and then you see in the video where she's like, there's traffic coming, and she has to stop to wave them along. Like you see her in the video going like this. And then
Yeah.
the ICE agents are like, no, stop, get out. And then she that's where she turns off. And the important thing I think to know is that she never like she peaks at like 5 miles an hour. So it's not
Yeah.
like we're talking
Yeah.
about like a
No.
full like speed acceleration. She's turning right. Like in the video I posted on my channel, the moment the shot was fired, the wheels are turned like this, and the ICE agent's like right here, right? From the
Yeah.
other side, you see him when you get the other side video, you see him literally sidestep almost. Like he sidesteps out of the way and then shoots once in the which goes through the front windshield. But then even more importantly, he fires two more shots
Yeah.
as she's driving away, where he's like right here and she's like in front of him. So he's like chasing her down. That's not going to be justified in any jurisdiction in the country. So like the idea that people are even defending that is crazy to me. And then now, just yesterday, we got something that MAGA was spreading as quote unquote body cam footage, which you brought up. It actually turns out it's the officer was carrying his cell phone and recording a video at first. And you can tell because when he walks up to the car, you see it in the window. He's holding a phone. And so you see him walk around the front of this car. And the video is really helpful because in it, the lady says to him, I'm not even mad at you, man. He walks by her, gets her plate. She's like, I'm not even mad at you, man. He calls her an effing B. You know, I'll censor cuss words for our kid viewers here. And then he walks back up to the front of her car. And you see her going like this, like she is like visibly hand over hand, turning the steering wheel away from him, which means he saw that, which means he knew she was turning away from him. And he then drops the cell phone, and that's when the shots are fired. So like, to me, it seems pretty clear cut murder.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah, that's kind of how I had it described to me too. Because like I said, I only saw the one video, but I know there's a bunch going around, and I was talking with people at work about it yesterday, and they were saying like, yeah, the car's like here, the guy's like over here, so it's like it's not even like she's gonna hit him. It's not like any imminent danger, which again to me is the only reasonable time to use lethal force is if like your life is in danger. Well then, yeah, of course, at that point you have a responsibility to defend yourself. But it doesn't seem, as you've described it, as my coworkers described it, like that is anything the case. So it'll be interesting to see what the investigation leads to, if we actually get justice.
So couple interesting things about that. DHS has now cut the local, like the city and the state out of the investigation. So DHS is investigating ICE. It's ICE investigating themselves. That's right. That's one thing to know. The other thing is JD Vance is claiming that this person has absolute immunity. So he's saying that even if the investigation finds he's in the wrong, no charges can be had for this guy. I don't even know if that's true.
What does that even mean? Why?
Absolutely. Like it's like cops have qualified immunity to where like they commit a crime in the line of duty, you know, they won't get charged for it or whatever. Like the cops in Uvalde who didn't go in to stop the shooting or whatever. And then there's absolute immunity, which means like no matter what, I guess you can't, which I don't even understand the term or why it would apply to them. But that's what he's saying. In the same speech, JD Vance went on to like say this was the Democrats' fault, this was the ladies' fault, this was everyone's fault but theirs. And then Trump, and I think the most maybe egregious part of all this, Trump was like, the officer was ran over, was about to die, had to go to the hospital, and is getting treated. In the video, you see the agent walk away like fast as he's like effing B, and he's like walking away. You see him go talk to other agents, and then he like walks off and drives away like on his own volition. But then Trump says he's like in the hospital getting life-saving treatment, which is just insane.
Yeah, I mean, even if he did get hit, like you said, it's only going like 5 miles per hour, dude. There's no life-saving treatment happening. Maybe she running over your foot and you got to get like a cast, bro, at most. Yeah. Like that's just not what's happening here. I'm curious to know, have we determined, has it come out, was she even somebody that like is an illegal immigrant?
No, this is a citizen.
She's a U.S. citizen. Yeah. So, I mean, what does that say about ICE doing their due diligence or doing like why? You know what I mean? Like, it's just insane. They're not even, they're supposed to be doing a very specific thing.
Yeah. Well,
why is this happening?
The MAGA defense, the MAGA line is that she didn't comply. They told her to stop and get out. And oh no, she was spooked by masked up unidentifiable agents and tried to pull off instead. So the don't tread on me, the I have my gun to prevent federal tyranny crowd is now saying comply immediately or die, which is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, which is, that's nothing new with MAGA or the right wing. That's what they said with the Black Lives Matter type of thing.
Which is why I appreciate you, Swall. You're such a rarity, I think, in pro-life people, where like you actually value life. You know what I mean? Most people, it's literally just controlling women.
Yeah, that's what, like I said, that's what happened during the Black Lives Matter summer in 2020. It was like, well, if they had just blah, 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 then, and that seems to always be the excuse, is just, they shouldn't have been blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, they shouldn't have been murdering people. Yeah. Like, I don't know what you mean by that, dude.
And it's weird
sure, two people can be wrong at the same time.
Exactly.
You should, try to follow instructions, try to keep things cool as the person who's being detained or stopped. But also, the person in power with the gun, you have an extra responsibility.
Yeah, it's like different levels here.
Yeah. Like, you're the one in charge of the situation.
Yeah.
Don't tell me, like, where's your training? Why are you getting so trigger happy?
Exactly. And the last thing that I'll have to say about it is MAGA has the ability to understand these things. They still talk about Ashley Babbitt to this day. I don't know how familiar you are with the lady who was shot on January 6th.
Right.
Charlie Kirk, there was no, oh, Charlie Kirk brought it on himself.
Right.
Anybody who said Charlie Kirk brought it on himself by his rhetoric, MAGA was like getting people fired for that. But
I
now
know.
they're like saying that this woman brought it on herself. So it's like, it's just, it's all weird to me. It's almost scary how tribalistic people can be now, to where it's almost just because their side did it, so many people can't admit that it was wrong. And it's like, this is what I said on my channel, the easy out here is to just admit it was wrong, but I still support ICE. Like, I still think ICE is doing a good duty. Largely, they should still do it. This was obviously wrong, but that doesn't discount what I feel about it. But that's not even what's being said. It's just ICE can murder people, comply with ICE or die. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, but people hate that. That's not just a MAGA thing. People hate to because that I run into that type of thing all the time with arguments. I'm like, you can think X is true and still hold your opinion.
Yeah.
It's not a defeater for your position.
Yeah.
It's just an acknowledgement of like you're an honest interlocutor.
Yeah.
But people, oh my gosh, people are so hesitant to do that. But yeah, I think the fact that you said DHS is doing the investigation is going to defeat any level of like faith that we have in this investigation to go well, or for any justice to be had, or for us to have any clarity. I mean, obviously, we, like you said, the video's out there, people can judge for themselves, but as far as like our government actually being honest, wouldn't hold my breath on that.
I agree,
Unfortunately.
and we'll go on to Venezuela, but the last thing I want to say is that it should be noted that not the city, not the state, and by polling in Minnesota, literally nobody wanted ICE there. Like, this was Trump sending them there against everybody's wishes. Minneapolis is a sanctuary state. I mean, sanctuary city. So ICE doesn't even really have duty there. So it was like completely preventable in terms of Trump just not overstepping states, which you think Republicans love states' rights until something like this happens. But
Of
yeah,
course.
on to Venezuela. We're obviously a bit late on this one, but me and Swal were discussing when it happened. You know, we're not like the foreign policy wonks or whatever. So
Yeah.
like, we figured it would still be relevant when we talked about it. And I mean, seeing as Trump is promising continued U.S. military presence, it might be relevant for the next 20 years if it's anything like George Bush, who I think this parallels. But what happened was me and Swad covered some of the strikes on boats in the Caribbean, many of these off the shore of Venezuela. We did, I think, over 20 strikes total, had killed around 100 in that. And Trump had been flirting with the idea of land attacks or regime change, calling Maduro illegitimate, which about the illegitimate claim, there is a lot of veracity to that. Like, there's a lot of reason to believe that, but there isn't hard evidence either. Like, in terms of the claim, it's largely about Maduro sympathizers messing with the voting machines, which wasn't proven. But what was proven was like interference in, like, he intimidated his opponents and things. So it's like a big thing. But either way, it's like, does that justify us invading a sovereign nation? I don't think so. So yeah, what happened was we launched 7 land attacks or 7 land strikes on various locations. We go in, we grab Maduro and his wife. Interesting, because his wife isn't indicted with anything, but we grabbed her too, probably because she was just there. And we whisked them away back here to face charges. And Trump from there is saying, we're going to get Venezuelan oil. He said that we'll use U.S. military to guarantee that we get it. Stephen Miller has said that we're keeping military outside of Venezuela, deciding what goes in and out. So it seems like a full regime change and occupation. MAGA is describing it more as a law enforcement operation. Swal, what are your thoughts and where do you fall in the conversation?
Yeah, like part of me is like, if I got kidnapped in the middle of the night, would I want them to take my wife with me so I'm not alone? Part of me is like, yeah. But then the other part of me is like, no, no, free my wife. You know, like
Yeah.
I'll be the martyr, but I'm kind of like, that's kind of nice. But at the same time, no, it's not nice. So
Yeah.
that is funny. She was just there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw my Facebook status on this. This is one of the last things I posted before I got offline. But I think that this is insane. I think this is absolutely unhinged. I don't think that this meets the requirements for just war at all. I think that first off, how are you about to go in, get the guilty guy, and then continue to attack?
Yeah.
So wait, we're giving him to safety, but screw everybody else.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. Second of all, yeah, kidnapping a head of state, insane. Now, you know, I've seen the arguments of like, well, look at the people of Venezuela. They're all celebrating. They're all celebrating. That's not really how morals work necessarily. Like, sure, they're all happy, and I get that they didn't like the guy, I guess, but that doesn't mean, oh, well, if they don't like it, then you can just kidnap people. That's not really morals. That's not how things work. So I get that. I get that. You know, I understand that they're supposedly celebrating in the streets. They're super thrilled, but that doesn't excuse the actions. Like, two things can be true at the same time. Again, um, so yeah, I think kidnapping a head of state from a sovereign nation is borderline a war crime, if not a war crime. I know that people have been going back and forth on UN and how this violates the charter and all of that jazz. To me, like I said, it just doesn't meet the requirements for just war, and for that reason, I'm compelled to condemn it. Um, there's no imminent threat, even if he is trafficking. That's not like, obviously, eventually drugs can be a life threatening situation, but it's not like gun to your head. It's not an imminent threat. And so I don't think it reaches that requirement. And then there's the valid authority. Obviously, Trump is a valid authority in America, but he doesn't have any valid authority over Venezuela. So it's like, and then he didn't go through the other valid authorities of like Congress if you're declaring war or anything like that. So I'm like, I don't see how anybody can say that this is justified regardless, unless you're a utilitarianism or a consequentialist where you're like the means or the, justify the outcome or whatever, then maybe, but that's like the only way you can really get there. And so I think we can condemn the regime if he really was like a totalitarianism guy or whatever, then yeah, we can condemn that, but that doesn't mean that this cure is okay. So I don't think we can normalize abducting leaders. When has this ever worked for America? Come in, help, either we come in or we help other people like freedom fighters or whatever, take out the guy, put in a new guy. Is the new guy ever good? No, it's like never happened. So, and then Trump's talking about like, what was it, Cuba? I forget whatever he said, but he was like, if they, they're next. It's like, what do you mean they're next, bro? We just expanding? Is this just
see, you're missing out. It's not just they've called out Cuba, Colombia, Nicaragua, and Iran are all now on the hit list, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, okay, is this Manifest Destiny again? Are we just taking territories? Is he Thanos? Is he collecting gems? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't understand how this can be allowed and how people can defend it. So yeah, I think that this is insane.
As the guy who literally ran on no new
wars, no new wars, no new
like
wars.
CNN played the funniest video of him on the campaign trail just last year saying
Supercut.
Yeah, like, we're not going to do regime changes anymore. No more regime changes. Like, we won't be sending troops overseas. And then literally now it's like, well, we got to do it, brother. Like, it's crazy to me. And as to what you were saying, for the videos, like, yeah, like it's always been weird to me because like people were also joyous after we got Saddam Hussein out of power, right? And then Al Qaeda rose to power.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like, do you know how this works? Read history.
Yeah.
It never goes well.
That's what I'm saying. Like we went into Iraq and Afghanistan for quote unquote good. We now know obviously not good. Right, we went in for quote unquote good reasons, and we were there for 20 years, and we killed a bunch of Iraqis and Afghanis, and for no reason, like civilians. We killed obviously,
and nothing happened. Too, but nothing good happened,
and nothing happened. We stayed there for 20 years and then left, and now there's a power vacuum again. And like the same is to be true here because like who trusts Trump, right? If so many people before Trump have tried this, and we saw that like it didn't work largely because of not enough effort or like, the US stops caring after a certain amount of time. Do we really think Trump is the guy who's going to care? Like Trump signed a half-ass ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. Israel's broken it 100 times. And Trump hasn't even mentioned that. Like he hasn't even said that that's happened. Right. So do we really think Trump is the guy who's going to be here? Like do we even want Trump's thumb on the scale is like another question. But like, for me, it just seems like, how long are we going to be there? Because if we're going to siphon oil, that's not ours. It's weird because, and this is another part of like a bit of history that gets more convoluted, is MAGA, JD Vance and Trump are trying to say we have some claim to Venezuelan oil, which isn't true. One, we did have a deal with Venezuela and pertaining to their oil, But one, it was like done through coercion. We pretty much by force made them agree to that deal. And then two, we never owned their oil or their oil reserves. We just had, they allowed our private companies to come in and use them for profit. That was essentially the deal. So there was like a bit of like a court finding on this, and Venezuela owes us money for property loss when they nationalized their oil, which obviously you can't privatize something that's nationalized, which put us out of their market. And so they owe us money for like the property, like the land essentially, but the oil has never been ours. So the idea that we're going in and we're like now stealing the oil because it's quote unquote ours, and we're going to send in our military to make sure we can get it, it sounds like we're doing Iraq again. It sounds like we're doing Afghanistan again, which begs the question, how long are we going to be there this time? Like, is it going to be 20 years again?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds desperate. It sounds like, I don't know what the conversations are behind the scenes, but it seems like they're like, we got to get some oil, we got to get some money, or whatever they were discussing, and they're like, oh, Venezuela, and Trump was like, tell me about that, and then they briefed him, and he was all like, can we go in? And they're like, yeah, I think we can get away with this, and then they go in. Like, that's what it almost seems like. I didn't want to mention that Maduro, however you pronounce it. This is via AP News. Did appear in U.S. court, and of course, he pleaded not guilty to the federal drug trafficking charges. So we'll see kind of what happens with the court case. But what's confusing to me, and maybe you understand this a little bit better, is like, in what world can we try a non-U.S. citizen in our U.S. courts? Is that a normal thing?
Well, it's for drug trafficking, like drugs sent here. So like kind of, yeah, like we can, but like the thing is if we can't expedite is what usually holds us back from ever actually do. Like there's a lot of people. There's more people in Venezuela, by the way. We have like a $25 million bounty on the guy who controls the police, who's been killing civilians with the police. We left him, by the way. So like, but we got Maduro. We left more powerful people in terms of corruption. But yeah, like the problem is usually we can't, like governments won't cooperate to expedite people to us. But here we just went in and grabbed him.
Yeah, so just who needs the government? Just go over him, bro, and just kidnap the guy. Like, if that's the case, like
government,
it seems like, I don't know, maybe the FBI has a list of people. Why don't we just go and get them? Let's just go get them. Come on.
My thing is like, what if another country did that to Trump? Trump preemptively bombed Iran.
True.
That is illegal by all international standards. Can Iran now come grab Trump? Like, are we all going to be cool with that? No, I mean, it'll be an act of war. Like, obviously.
I mean, why stop at Trump? Obama. Lots of people were bombing other people and doing things that other countries, I'm sure, think are illegal or aren't thrilled about. Let's all living U.S. presidents. Let's get them.
The only problem is that one wouldn't hold up for MAGA, because MAGA would be like, yeah, let's get Obama. You got to use someone that they'll be like, well, no.
Let's get Obama. It's crazy.
They're like, yeah, let's just murder him. Actually, let's just hang him in front of everyone.
Right.
So, but yeah,
Mike Pence. He's
leave Trump. Let's get Pence and Obama.
Yeah.
Real criminals. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say about that one?
No, just obviously, I think we can both say we condemn this.
Yeah.
Outright.
Yeah. I condemn most war actions. I condemn especially invading sovereign countries. I think is insane, especially doing it without congressional approval, even more insane. But because
I guess we're just Putin now,
Yeah, exactly. They want to be Putin so bad, but they can't. They don't got the sauce that Putin has. Onto Somali fraud. It's almost been so long and so many stories that I kind of like vaguely, it all comes together. It's all in one for me is kind of what I'm trying to say. Because it started as MAGA was uncovering this massive Somali fraud with, I think, Medicaid or Medicare, one of the two. And then there was like this video about daycares. This kid went to all these daycares, which as someone who's worked in daycares and clinics, I would love to get into that video because I think his antics were pretty insane. But yeah, so now it's this big thing where I guess there's this massive Somali fraud in Minnesota, and Tim Walz is covering it up and all of this and blah, 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 if you buy MAGA. So if you buy what MAGA says about it, when you look into it, it finds out that the fraud is happening, to be clear. But it wasn't covered up by Tim Walz. There were 59 arrests under Biden. Walz has went to the legislature over a dozen times, has closed daycares. So it is an issue. There is fraud. but it's like the idea that it's some like Democrat cover up, like Elon Musk is saying that like we smuggled Somalis in on purpose to let them do like it's all kind of crazy conspiracies coming from something that does seem to be somewhat true, but it falls apart when we get to the daycares, which is why I kind of want to talk about that also separate. But Swal, what did you see? And then what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. When I had proposed the topic, I was mainly talking about the daycare situation and
Okay,
that spawning further scrutiny from the online
sure. So we
right.
can focus on that because that's what's
Yeah,
more interesting to me too.
yeah, the online right further scrutiny, and then just like, okay, well, what else are the Somalis doing? And then them discovering all the stuff that, like you said, is already known. It's not like this is some Watergate blow the whistleblower type of situation. Um, but yeah, I think my stance here is pretty simple and pretty normal, but it's, prosecute the guilty, protect the innocent, and don't smear people's ethnicities.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the video? The what is it? Nick Shirley was his name, or what?
Yeah,
Like what
yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Too much time on his hands. No.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, the main thing that I had read about was the one Somali guy who like went to go open a gentleman's club or whatever, and that's how they started investigating, and then the guy started investigating based on that. I didn't see the actual video. I read the articles about it. So
Oh
I'm curious
God.
to know. You
Yeah.
said
Oh
that you have
God.
thoughts on the actual video. Was the guy like breaking and entering, or like what was
It's
the?
okay, so it's actually insane. Like it's
Yeah.
actually a pretty crazy video. And you should watch it. So like
Okay.
I'm not like lying or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But so and it's not as bad as like breaking and entering, but there's very clear like have you ever like do you take your kids to day or they might be too young to have ever went to like a daycare or anything? Or do
They're not.
you have any experience with like a daycare or anything? Is
It's a 2-year-old's class,
Okay.
so
Okay. Yeah. So then
whatever.
that's close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. You definitely
Yeah.
would understand. So first problem, this guy pulls up with a camera. Camera's out.
Yeah.
Right on the door. First off, no daycare, no
Right.
center
Right.
with kids is going to let you in with a camera.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
HIPAA. HIPAA. They're not going to.
Yes.
You're going to need the approval of every parent of every kid
Yep.
to do that. So they're not going to
Yep.
let you in. That's the first reason. And then he's all like, they're like, who do you work for? They even ask him, are you doing an inspection? He goes, I work for myself. It's over right then. The weird
Yep.
guy walks up with a camera. I work
Yeah.
for myself. Where are the kids? He says, I work for myself. Where are the kids? We're locking the clinic down. If you come to my clinic and
Yeah. And
we're
calling the
locking it down.
cops.
So, but then it gets even worse. Past that, they go to shut the door after he says that. He grabs the door. He grabs it and tries to pull it
Okay.
open.
So dude's a maniac.
That's over. Like it goes on lockdown. Like the second
Yeah.
an unidentified adult tries to walk into your clinic and
Yes.
especially tries to pull the door open when you're closing it, they're hiding
1,000%.
every kid. They're locking they're locking the place down and they're calling the cops. So then and that's what he's like. He's all like, look, we can't even see any kids. And it's like, I wonder why. It's almost like the daycare is doing their job. And then the funniest part is he goes the next day, he meets like CNN out there for an interview. And like this, as the CNN person is interviewing him, parents are pulling up and dropping kids off. And she goes, look, they're dropping kids off right now. And you said they're closed. And you know what his line was? They're saving face. They knew they were caught and they're doing this to save face. So the line from MAGA is that they caught these people doing fraud and the government, rather than admitting it, is now paying actors to show up with kids because it's like on video. They show up with this kid standing out front and then CBS went inside another one of the daycares this kid went to. There's like the things you would imagine to see in a daycare all over.
Right. The little artworks and
it's full. There's kids, like all their faces are blurred out and stuff, but like CBS is like in there. There's kids running around, fully operational business. So like to me, the video is just like a show of like none of these people have any standards to how kids should be cared for because it seems like the daycare did everything by the book, in my opinion.
okay, well that helps because yeah, the video it sounds like definitely not an actual legitimate, at least not the one, definitely not the one with the actual kids in it. But I had read one of the stories about a guy like they actually like arrested, and he had like 3 or 4 in different same like county, but like different cities or whatever. And that he had it for like 10 years or whatever, and they interviewed like the townspeople, and everyone had like people had put in sort of like what do you call them, like basically like, hey, you should check this out to the cops and stuff
Oh.
before. So like
Mhm.
a legitimate case of daycare fraud
Yeah.
because they discovered it because, like I said, apparently he was trying to get approved to open a strip club or something, and then they discovered that he had a bunch of like fake
Yeah.
businesses, and so like this is happening
Mhm.
despite
Yeah.
this guy's video, and it seems like my understanding was the dude kind of read about that stuff and then was gonna go like, oh, investigative journalism and
Yeah.
do I work for myself and do all that. So like I said, I think we can all agree anybody who's doing fraud should be arrested.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean everyone from the country of Somalia is just a fraudster
Yeah, because
immediately.
MAGA's like
No, doesn't mean that.
we have to ban all immigration. Andy Ogles
Yeah.
is like a prominent MAGA guy. He's all like, we have to stop all immigration because of this, and like who knows what other fraud they're doing. And then it was somebody, what did they say? It was so insane. They're like, it was, I think it was Lindsey Graham. I don't want to say who it was because this is actually like a really insane thing. But he was like, we have to remember that Somalis are new, right? They're doing the fraud that they understand how to do. Like if we let them
Whoa.
stay, I was like, bro,
Whoa.
brother. And it's the most interesting part of this that's getting left out of like all the mainstream coverage by the right is that the head of the operation seems to be a white woman. Like the lady at the top of all this is an American citizen, like a white woman, right? Who I mean, I don't want to say like taking advantage of, but like she might very well might be like it's an operation headed by her. And then the other part that you said, like we can all agree that fraud should be prosecuted. I do think like we can agree that fraud should be prosecuted. I don't think MAGA can agree because Trump has pardoned endless amounts of fraudsters. I read a list of like 12 people on my channel the other day of people he had pardoned. The ones I remember, Rick Scott did $1.3 billion in Medicare fraud. Trump pardoned him. MAGA hasn't said anything. Philippa Formez did 1.4 billion in Medicare fraud. Trump pardoned him. MAGA hasn't said anything. George Santos, the MAGA Republican, he like ripped off elderly people for like $300,000 or $400,000. Trump pardoned him. Nobody said anything. Paul Walzak committed like $200 million and I think Medicare fraud. Trump pardoned him. MAGA hasn't said anything. So like, to me, it's also kind of funny when MAGA only cares about the fraud when it's brown people that they can blame for it.
Yeah, or just what they deem as like the other team, like
Yeah.
because think about like the snap and the wick and all that stuff, and the big argument there was fraud. We can't get we have to get rid of the entire program because of the 1% of fraud or whatever, and it's like again, yeah, fraud's bad, bro. And it sucks because it undermines the trust in things like Snap and Wick. Like, yeah, when people do fraud, then you're like, well, the whole system's bunk. And people who aren't really like super critical thinkers, they just think, well, then we got to get rid of it all. And it's like, well, no. But so yeah, like I agree, fraud is really bad because of that, and so now we have people who want to vote against people having access to food because they're thinking, well, it's all just fraud.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, but so
Those
yeah,
same people voted for Donald Trump, who was found liable of hundreds of
yeah.
millions of
So the
dollars
lack
in
of
fraud.
consistency is problematic, I think, because yeah, if we were all going after every fraudster, then like sure, but yeah, like I said, prosecute the
Yeah.
people who are guilty, protect the people who aren't guilty, and then don't blame it on somebody's ethnicity. It's not
Yeah.
in their DNA to commit fraud. Like no, like that's just I mean, that's not how DNA works. So yeah, I don't know. I think that we just need to have like, tighter systems, look into things more, try to be as transparent as possible with audits and stuff. Stay on top of I guess it would be Department of Revenue on the state level rather than the IRS, but like, when there's things like these daycares or any fraud like that, we should be able to catch it a lot sooner than like 5, 10, 20 years. Some dude shouldn't have like 7 fraud businesses before
Yeah.
he sets off an alarm bell. Feels like they should be
And
able to tell that quicker.
if anything, like in my opinion, it's the way we do childcare is so convoluted and it allows for this kind of fraud. Like it's something, in my opinion, we should just nationalize. I think that childcare should be like government provided, and maybe I'm just like a woke socialist for that. But I just think that at least
I don't hate that idea.
even if we let private companies do it and the government subsidize them to like to have it universal or something like that, like up to like a certain income level, you will subsidize it for you to cover those people. And then obviously if you're making like 100,000 or more, maybe you pay, like, I think we could work out something that made it a lot more like easy, and then
Mhm.
less able to do fraud. But that's just me. I'm just a woke lefty. So
No, you
you
might be
know,
onto something there.
yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to say about the Somali fraud or?
No, I'm good. Let's move on to the debate.
Sounds good. So tradition is tradition, feature or a bug. Sometimes I feel like when we do these prompts, we should maybe like establish what we mean a little more, just because like I went like kind of like traditional like values and roles. I hope that's what you meant. But do you want to lay out your positive case first, or do you want me to lay out
Sure.
the negative case first? Up to you.
Sure, I can go first. So, yeah, I'm more of yeah. I mean, that's part of it. Obviously, those are traditions, and that's part of tradition. But yeah, my argument, I guess my thesis, if you will, is essentially is that tradition is a feature, because it's basically society's long-term memory, and it preserves what works, it stabilizes our identity as a society, as Americans, and it prevents every generation from relearning everything, reinventing the wheel, and starting from scratch. So I think if you don't know why a norm exists, that you shouldn't get rid of it until you understand what it was put in place for. I don't know if you're familiar with the old fence thing. I know Ben Shapiro says it a lot. If you come across a fence in the woods, his argument, I don't know how true it is with Republicans, especially these days, but his argument generally is a conservative goes, "Why is this fence here? Let's figure out what it's here for." And his idea is that the progressive or the lefty says, "Let's get rid of this fence. Let's just tear it down. It's not here for any reason." Blah 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 blah. And whether I don't want to make it a left, right, whatever, I think the first thing is how we should approach tradition. I think we should go, what is this here for? Why do we have this tradition? Is it serving a purpose? Before just getting rid of it because it's tradition and it's old and it's yada yada yada. So I think traditions can transmit, um, you know, for like the family and community can transmit common culture, belonging, duties, meanings, and stuff. And that isn't something that we should just reinvent every, couple of years, every generation. So that's generally my case. I got more stuff, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Sure. I guess if laid out like that, I don't necessarily disagree. I would disagree that people do that. I would definitely disagree that progressives do that. But what I had was, and like I said, I kind of went more for like values and roles specifically. I think that traditional values and roles are kind of a bug for everyone that they don't favor, which essentially boils down to like straight white men, mostly men, like predominantly, I guess, in like a patriarchal society. But like traditionally, black people were slaves. If you want to go back that far, if you want to go back like not that far, black people couldn't own property. They weren't able to get loans at the same route. They were segregated from like redlined, I guess would be the better word, from having the same quality education. These are traditions, and I think these traditions are bugs. Women traditionally couldn't work, couldn't vote, couldn't open a bank account. These are traditions that I think were harmful. Gay people traditionally couldn't get married, couldn't adopt. These are traditions I think were harmful. And why, like how I would justify those being harmful is one, we saw an economic boom after these things changed, when women entered the workforce, when black people were able to own properties, get loans. Obviously, our economy like shot up. And then gay people, like they have statistically the same outcomes, which I think we've talked about that many times in the household, whether it's like marriage, whether it's through adoption, these things, they have like the same statistical outcomes. So to me, I think these are ways that tradition works as a bug. And I think in many ways, as society evolves, then so should tradition, because as it doesn't, it's going to exclude these kind of new populations, that might not be the right word, but that kind of like evolve, come out of what society evolves into. And that's why we should always be willing to change tradition. But like in what you said, I agree that we also shouldn't just change it because it's tradition. So that's kind of
Okay.
my,
Yeah, it seems like there's not as much uncommon ground here. Yeah, I would say some traditions are definitely unjust, and we should judge them as so. But I think like abolishing tradition as a category is problematic, and that's how you end up just going with trends, groupthink, propaganda, or even like uh, corporations or whoever's in power just putting things in. So I think that tradition can be a guardrail against things like that, and it can make progress
I don't
possible.
know. I don't know if it's a guardrail,
Um,
things like that.
so like I would say rather than like slavery. I wasn't thinking like slavery as a tradition. I was more thinking of like um families, taking care of your grandparents into their old age, taking care of your parents into their old age. These are traditions that we have as society.
Sure, I just think it's like, I guess the point why I brought those up is it's kind of like a slippery slope, and it's also it's kind of hard to know what people mean when they say tradition, because someone could say tradition and they just mean like we want to bring back that families are strong, but then they could also mean that they don't think women should vote. And it's like, I guess my point and like where we agree is that we shouldn't remove tradition just because it's tradition. I just think most tradition is harmful. That's probably where the disagreement would be had, is I think more traditions are harmful than you do. And I don't think tradition should ever be like forced upon someone. Like if someone wants to be like a trad wife and a trad husband in a relationship, then let them do it, right? But if someone doesn't want to be that, then we shouldn't act like they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with force, but I would disagree with like act like they're doing something wrong, depending on what you mean by that. Obviously, I'm not saying like stand out in their yard with like a sign and be a trad wife, be a trad. I'm not saying like, you know, that or anything like that, but I think like generally as a concept, social pressure can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. But I think it can be a good thing. I think it can be, you know, hey, you're kind of outside the bounds here, and that can make somebody reconsider. They might still come to the conclusion that they want to live outside the bounds. But I think that social pressure can help keep people in check, because sometimes we can have sort of a individualistic mindset, and try to we can save people a lot of pain sometimes by saying like, look at the history here, here's the tradition, like
That seems to
we
not
already have solved this, we already know how to fix this issue,
That
and you're
doesn't
trying
make
to
a lot of
reinvent the
sense on
wheel.
its face to me. I don't know why we would set the bounds, like the guidelines of today from the past, because society is always evolving, right? So like the constructs in society are always going to evolve. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, especially like historically, change has brought great things, right? We changing to allow women into the workforce led to a massive economic boom, right? Changing to allow women to vote led to a massive shift in the type of like policy and things that were able to be voted on, right? Allowing Black people to own property massively lowered the income inequality, right? That's still a major problem, but it lowered it after that. So I don't know why we would set like the bounds of today off the past when it's like today even is always evolving.
So what would you say is like the test for distinguishing between quote harmful tradition versus, I guess, useful tradition, and who gets to decide that?
Well, I don't know if it needs decide it necessarily in my worldview, because I don't think that it should be forced upon or pressured onto anyone. But I think that the way to distinguish between harmful and beneficial is just like the outcomes, right? Like women not being able to vote is harmful to them. Women not being able to work is harmful to them, right? Black people not being able to get the same loans that white people do is harmful to them. Like these interracial marriage, like we weren't, I don't remember when interracial marriage was like starting to be allowed, but when that was blocked, that was harmful to every person who loved someone of the other race. So like I think that there's pretty clear observable harms in most of these traditions to like the out groups. There's like an in-group out group with most tradition, and the out group is often harmed.
So like for instance, a tradition you could say is if a couple what's the word I'm looking for, a heterosexual couple, you know, has a kid or whatever. A tradition is, you know, mom and dad living together, raising the kid, etc., starting a little family unit, buying a house, yada yada yada. um we know from data wise, like um it's typically, I mean, obviously there's always going to be outliers and whatnot, but typically worse for the kid to like be going back and forth between houses, dealing with each parent dating other people, bringing new adults into their lives. These can be dangerous situations and whatnot for the children. So a tradition is like, you know, the family unit, for instance, like that. Um, would you say that's a harmful tradition, a useful tradition? Um,
I think it
Overall,
depends
obviously, I
on
know there's
the
going to be like specific cases, but
Yeah, it depends on the application. Like I think obviously two parents in the household is like, if you want to say that's a tradition, that's
Yeah.
fine. But also that I like, again, like the same benefits extend to like same-sex parents and things. So I don't know if I would call that a tradition necessarily, rather than like an economic fact that having two incomes in a household is going to make you
Well,
able
the
to
outcome would
child
be the
raise.
fact, but the like thing itself is a societal, like we just
Sure, but
invented
I just
that.
mean like I don't know, like if you're saying that like the tradition is specifically heterosexual parents, I would just say that the benefit is just two parents. And if that still fits in the tradition, then that is beneficial, right? But I because I don't think there's anything you could point to make it exclusive to like two heterosexual parents. It's just two parents, two adults in the household, even not necessarily parents or like a marriage. But what I think would be harmful, or the things that could be harmful that come from it, are the laws or things that were made when that tradition was had that made that, so to speak, the tradition. Like no fault divorce wasn't allowed. So there were like women who were like stuck in these like abusive relationships that couldn't leave. And that's more so why this tradition was like the norm, because it was harder for women to leave abusive relationships. And there's strong data that in a divorced household, a child performs better than in I forget what the exact word, it's like a high trauma household essentially, but like a
Oh,
household
okay.
where like the parents are always like abusive or constantly fighting or
Sure.
whatever. The psychological distress then outweighs any like economic disadvantages that they could be placed on in a divorced household.
And then this is like more I guess we'll say like capital T tradition is like society wide, and then lowercase tradition would be like my
Household.
family puts up the Christmas tree
Yeah.
every year. Um, what are your thoughts on the importance of little T traditions within relationships, families, whatever, smaller, more
Yeah.
household level?
That's kind of what I was saying, is like that's what I'm perfectly fine with. If you want, as long as again it's like your tradition isn't like well, I can't rent my house to a black person because my traditions don't let black people own property or something, like obvious ones where we would both agree. But like in terms of like just plain and simple ones, if that's what your household wants to do, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, it's a bit different when kids get implicated in it, I guess, because if there's traditions that could be harmful to the child, that obviously the child is not going to consent to because they just have to do whatever their parents say, then that might make it a little shakier. But off top, I don't know what any of those necessarily would be.
Right, sure. Yeah, like I think for me, like like I'm adopted, as I think some of the viewers know. I think I've talked about it before
Me
on the show.
too.
Yeah, I
Common
forgot we're both
ground.
adopted.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if you were adopted by black people, white people, or whoever, but
Mixed. Both my parents are mixed. So yeah.
okay, so I'm adopted by like white people, so I'm black, obviously. I have no connection whatsoever. I don't even know what kind of black I am. I've never done a DNA test. I couldn't tell you if I've got Haitian, African. I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you. I have no idea. And so like, we had some traditions growing up that we invented, family pizza and game night, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like since like converting to being Catholicism, now I've got like a 2,000 year tradition to go through, and like holidays and things to uh um like individual traditions, things that we bake for specific holidays, blah 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 blah. And like for me, I think there's an importance to like cultural heritage, I guess, of some kind, whether that's chosen like mine is conversion, or whether that's it's just by DNA or whatever, like you're raised in it, African, Chinese, whatever, you celebrate the Chinese New Year, moon cakes,
Mhm.
et cetera, stuff like that. And I think if we didn't have that, it's like hard for me to imagine life without those things. You know what I mean? Like I don't even know what it's like what we do as people to some degree. So it's like hard to imagine. So for me, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Well,
I think it's important to, if you don't have those, if you were raised without them, maybe you grew up in a really crummy situation, and you end up having kids, I think it benefits your kids to create those and to start those in your family. Obviously,
I
ones
think in a
you
lot
you
of
can
ways.
decide to get rid of some, you can decide to keep some, but overall, like the idea of it, I think is something to keep, and that we should fight to keep in families, households, etc.
Somewhat. I mean, I'm less like I'm not even concerned with like family traditions. I think those are definitely good things. Like if you want to have a family game night or whatever. You did bring up one that I just said I couldn't think of one off top. Religious tradition, I do think, and we'll disagree here, obviously, but I think is harmful to push on kids, mostly because obviously I think religion is untrue. I think believing things that are untrue is harmful. So I think that at the very least, there should be more of like, and it might have been different for you, but there should be more of like an availability for a kid to actually choose, right? If they want to believe a religion or if that's something they believe without it being like shoved down their throat. In my experience, like is what I'm saying might be different for you. In my experience, when I was a kid, my mom made me go to church with her all the time. She made me go to Sunday school. She like forced these like sorts of beliefs. I think I've explained before how like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think evolution was a thing. I thought the
Mm-hmm.
earth was like this. And like these things were like told to me. They were like forced upon me almost, to where I then hit like middle or high school and I was like, whoa, like my entire worldview is false almost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I understand for a lot of kids who grow up religious, they'll stay religious their whole life and they might not have that problem. But I think that that is potential harm that could be had if they grow up and they don't align with the worldview that was like shoved down their throat when they're like a kid.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, there's definitely a way in which you could say like the evolution's false or whatever. Or you could call that a tradition. Um, but for me, it would be more like I don't know I know kind of how you grew up, but I wouldn't know the ins and outs. But I would think like I know now it's more of a like secular thing. Christmas, obviously, its roots aren't at least whatever we never ended up having that debate,
Yeah,
but its roots aren't. But I would think like more like I don't know if your family did this or not, but I'm sure you've heard of it, like waking up Christmas morning and reading the story of baby Jesus. Like I
yeah,
would call that the tradition, whereas like evolution's false. That's more like a teaching of the religion. That's kind of a different, like, sure, it's tradition in the sense that it's obviously continued to be passed down, but that's not like that's kind of a separate thing in my mind than like the actual or like going to Sunday, going to Christmas mass or worship or whatever. That would be like the tradition. Whereas like what they're teaching at the thing would be like the teaching. So,
sure.
um,
I guess I was just considering
but
religion
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
as the tradition and then the beliefs that can be even downstream from that. I think a lot of people are probably like inadvertently homophobic or misogynistic in some ways just because of like their form of religion is like really strict on no men, men with men is a sin and women can't lead and this and that. And it
Men
feels
is a sin.
yeah, men are sin, and that's the feminist religion.
Yeah.
But
I
I'm
did.
joking, women. Don't come after me.
I did have a question about one of the things you said there. You said I think that religion is false. Would this is kind of sort of off topic, but
Yeah, you're
for
good.
clarity's sake, would you say that you are a Gnostic atheist, meaning you know religion or there you know there's no God and you don't believe there's a God, or would you say you're an agnostic atheist? You don't know if there is or not a God, but you don't currently believe it.
I mean, I'm probably agnostic atheist. I think all religions fail, right? So I think that if there is a God, it's not going to align with any of the religions that we have. But then most God concepts fail to me. I think almost, especially if we're positing God as a being with a mind, then I don't even think God is real. So in that way, maybe I'm Gnostic. I don't know. I've like I've said, I've been on quite the transition this last like 10 years. Where like 10 years ago, I probably would have said I'm still like, or even like 5 years ago, I would have said I'm religious, right? I'm
Yeah.
spiritual, but not Christian, right? I believe in the Christian God, but I'm not Christian. I would have said I was agnostic. That's kind of what I think when we had our abortion debate, you were like getting on to me because I was like, I'm agnostic, but I'm not like religious or whatever. Now I would say I'm leaning more Gnostic, but I'm open to the possibility. But I do think most religions are false.
And then one last question on that. Again, I know this is off topic for the
Yeah,
actual
no,
debate,
you're
but
good. You're good.
would you acknowledge that when you say all religions are false, that now you have the burden of proof, you have to prove it?
Well, yeah, yeah,
Okay, good,
yeah.
cool.
That's kind of like a blanket statement too.
Yeah,
I
me
would I
personally. Oh, go ahead.
Would I defend all religions are false in a debate? Probably not. But I have strong reasons to believe that all religions are false. I would defend that Christianity is false, though, in like a debate.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. For me, for me personally, I think it's an unprovable claim. So I think it's just as ridiculous as saying that you know that God exists. I think saying I know he doesn't is equally ridiculous. So I think for me, the only claim, if you're an atheist, that's reasonable is agnostic atheism, which is I don't know, because I don't think anybody can meet the burden of proof. You can't go to the backside of Uranus and uncover a rock and see if God's there. It's impossible to prove that God does not exist. So holding to that claim is absolute ludicrous.
Well, I don't know.
In my opinion,
I think any
specific gods,
a specific incantation of God is pretty easy.
Yeah. I would agree there. Specific gods. Like I would say I was Gnostic on like Thor.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's why kind of when we did our and I know we're kind of getting over, so just to wrap it up or whatever, but when we did our thing where we were like why I left religion and why you came to religion, and I said like most God concepts fail. Every God concept I've ever heard has failed to me on a logical contradiction, which I don't think can exist, which would make them inherently false, which is why I would say that I like God is false. But obviously, and I said that then there is a
ones that you've never heard.
God concept I haven't heard that could be given, that could be logically coherent. It's just every single one I've ever heard leads to a logical contradiction somewhere.
Yeah, that's why I was talking to some buddies, and I'll wrap it up too. Last night about it, and yeah, I was telling them for me, it's like Catholicism. The only other reasonable worldview is agnostic atheism, in which I'm an agnostic. People get mad, and Catholicism. I'm an agnostic theist because I think that in virtue of being a human being, it is almost impossible, unless we're saying conditionally, when I mean like within our system, I think it's almost impossible to quote unquote know something. You can only be extremely confident, or if you do know it, it's relevant to our system. So I'm like, I could be in the matrix. So to say I know God exists is such an astronomically arrogant claim to me that I
don't know. It's almost that's so pedantic to me. Like, and this is the last thing I'll say. That's a bit pedantic to me because I think that a strong confidence interval, towards something, is reason enough to say that, or at least believe. I guess like if you're saying like no in the absolute sense, but I think there's like an inherent conflation between like know and believe. Like if you believe something fully, people consider that knowing it, and I think colloquially that's fine. But I think like again, this is why I would say it's pedantic, because you're like going to like the the very specific thing of no, which it's like
I would say knowledge is a subset of belief. You believe it, but that's different from knowing it, because I can believe this thing, but I don't actually know. Like I believe my wife's never cheated on me, but I don't know that. I don't know that. I can't really know that.
That's just it's like that reduces the solipsism to me, which is just like we can't know anything. And to me, it's like if there's a confidence interval, I think there's justification to say you know something. If you pass 100 houses and they're all blue, I think you're justified in thinking the next one and believing the next one is blue, right? It could be any color. There's not even a higher probability the next house is blue, but because of prior evidence and stuff, I think you're justified in that belief. But did you have any last words you want to say?
Let's wrap it up.
Cool. So let us know what you guys thought about the episode. Like I always say at the end, if you're on Spotify, add us to your playlist. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on the website, like, and I think it's subscribe. There's something where you can join and keep up with us every week. And we're here every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next week. Peace.
Peace.